Hello everyone, this is Riley Doxey here, and I'm bringing you an update on Tropical Storm Barry in the Gulf of Mexico, which has recently been named and has become Barry. And I'm going to show some of what's going on with it and some model runs and generally what's going to happen. So as we get into this, we take a look at the basic information, and we can see that Tropical Storm Barry has been named. Right now it's weak with 1,005 millibars and only 40 mile an hour winds. The aircraft data that has been flying into the storm had indicated that there was winds in there between the flight and the surface level winds that was supportive of a 35 knot intensity, 40 miles an hour. However, those winds that the aircraft found are away from the surface of the circulation. So it's away from the circulation, which means that right now it's obviously disorganized. Some of those cloud tops are sheared to the south of the circulation, and most of the thunderstorm activities to the south and the west of the circulation, which indicates a disorganized system. And as you can see right here, this is the NHC forecast track, and they are predicting that it will become a hurricane right before it makes landfall in Louisiana, which is what generally most of the models were agreeing on, at least until now. But that appears that, if anything, it may be a little less likely, because honestly, I'm not too confident right now with the state of the storm and the organizational pattern of it. It's clearly very disorganized with a weak, broad center. You can see there at the end a little bit of convective blowups, but I don't really think that that's anything too spectacular at this time. I mean, and that could increase, but at this time it's not really anything too spectacular. And we have overall a disorganized and weak system still, despite the fact that it has strengthened into Tropical Storm Barry. And currently we have some of that aircraft in there right now. As we take a look here at the aircraft reconnaissance data, when it loads, you will see that the plane is in there flying around. And right here, as we take a look at the observations from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, we can see that, as I mentioned, to the south of the circulation, we can see where those stronger winds, those winds that was supportive of a 35 knot intensity, were found. They was found in the southern convection to the south of the circulation. And as you can see, the circulation is exposed right now, and aircraft is in there right now trying to get some more data. Don't really think right now they're finding too much of organization, although it has organized enough overnight to be declared Tropical Storm Barry, which could maybe be a little bit of a jump to the name status. But either way, the wind data definitely did support it, and the NHC upgraded it to Tropical Storm Barry, and the aircraft data is still in there right now. And as we take a look at some of the data that it's recording, you can see flight level winds right now are under 40 knots. We got, looks like, about 38 or so, and some of these SFMR datas are questionable. We have some, looks like a 53 or 54 knot reading that's unflagged, but that's certainly questionable considering the organizational structure of the system and the fact that the flight level winds don't support that. So even though it's not flagged as suspect, it's still questionable. It does not have to be flagged to be questionable. So with that being said, let's take a look here at what some of the models are showing in Tropical Storm Barry. They seem to have backed off a little bit, and Even the NAM model, the model that developed it to 866 millibars, which is never going to happen to begin with, has backed off now too. So as we look right here, we take a look at the GFS model. It shifted, as well as the other models, has shifted to the east compared to yesterday. And it's a little weaker too. It's coming in at 988 millibars, a strong tropical storm, maybe a low-end Category 1 hurricane. But either way, a lopsided system. And this is maybe not quite as strong as we was initially expecting a couple days ago and yesterday, but either way, the rainfall potential of this system has not really decreased, and that still remains a big threat, especially considering that those areas are already inundated with flooding and that the Mississippi River is above average. The river gauges, some of the river gauges are at major flood stage. So that's not a good situation in terms of the rainfall. And right here we take a look at the ECWMF model. And we can see that it's coming in even weaker. It shows 993, which is inland. So at landfall, the ECWMF is thinking that it will be stronger than that because it weakens as it moves inland. And as we take a look at some of the other models, some of the more or less reliable models, like the CMC, it also indicates generally the same track as what the GFS did, but it shows a weaker system at 997 millibar. So the CMC is not really thinking it's going to strengthen much, but the CMC never really developed much systems anyways, even in a case to when you know that the system is going to develop rapidly or develop strong, the CMC still fails to catch on to that. So, but it's mostly in line, or not mostly in line, but it's not too far off of the other models. And with the disorganized structure of the storm, that's possible. But what I'm thinking is that it will probably intensify a little near the coastline before the actual landfall happens, because the models have remained really consistent on that happening, and that's an indication that that could still happen. So as we take a look at some of the steering currents here, this is what the GFS is thinking. The GFS is thinking overall it's been in a weak steering environment. We know that. The GFS is indicating a very weak ridge above Missouri, and that's not really affecting it too much right now. And then as you can see, whoa, as it moves inland, a ridge builds over Georgia. You see the high pressure, 1,020 millibar high pressure. As we put this in motion now, you can see that that prevents it from accelerating to the northeast. The ridge prevents it from accelerating to the northeast. But as we continue to put this in motion here, it prevents it from accelerating to the northeast before the ridge begins to recede and weaken. At that point, the system is absorbed by a trough, and it's off to the races. It's absorbed within the trough and completely dissipated at that point. And so, as we take a look at the forecast discussion by the National Hurricane Center here, as we'll quickly go over this, the low pressure area over the northern Gulf of Mexico has become better organized during the past several hours, with a large convective band in the southern semicircle. The circulation center has become better defined, although it is still elongated, and multiple cloud swirls are seen rotating around the mean center. In addition, Air Force Reserve and NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft report flight level winds and SFMR winds high enough for an initial intensity of 35 knots. Based on these developments, the system is upgraded to Tropical Storm Barry. The initial motion is a rather uncertain 244 knots, which basically means west, almost, or exactly due west, according to the National Hurricane Center at this point. Barry is being steered by a weak to low mid-level ridge to the north, and a weakness in the ridge is forecast to develop during the next 24 to 48 hours, as you've seen there by the GFS model, and then the ridge builds back in. This should allow for the cyclone to turn northwestward and eventually northward. However, there is a large spread in the track guidance. HWRF and HMON model forecast Barry to move almost due north from its current position with the landfall in Mississippi, while the UPMET takes the cyclone to the upper Texas coast. The GFS, ECWMF, and Canadian models lie in between these extremes. Overall, there has been slight eastward shift of the guidance envelope, so the new forecast track is also adjusted slightly to the east. It should be noted, though, that the new track is west of the consensus. Barry is being affected by northerly shear and water vapor imagery indicates mid to upper level dry air is moving into the cyclone from the northeast. So moderate shear is now expected to persist until the cyclone makes landfall. Despite this less than ideal environment, the guidance forecasts slow but steady intensification, so the NHC forecast follows this trend. The new intensity forecast is similar to the previous warning, calling for Barry to become a hurricane just before landfall in Louisiana, and it lies between the HCCA and the ICON consensus models. So as we take a look at some of the other information here, wind speed probabilities. This is not going to be a significant wind event, but there's still the potential for some tropical storm force winds. And obviously, wherever it makes landfall at will feel the strongest of the winds around the core. But this is not, the winds are not the main threat. The main threat associated with this is the rainfall. And as we take a look at the rainfall rates, you can see that there's quite a bit of rainfall forecasted, over 15 inches in some portions. And a lot of rainfall, 10 to 15 inches, potentially more. I would not be surprised if we see more in areas like New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and southeastern Louisiana is low-lying and relatively swampy. So these areas are very prone to flooding. And this is certainly not something that this area needs, and it's important for people to take the rainfall seriously. As you can see right here, the Weather Prediction Center issued a high risk for flash flooding potential in the high rain zone areas. The key messages: Barry is expected to produce storm surge, rainfall, and wind hazards to the central Gulf Coast during the next several days. There is danger of life-threatening storm surge inundation along the coast of southern and southeastern Louisiana, where a storm surge warning has been issued. The highest storm surge inundation is expected between the mouth of the Atchafalaya River and Shell Beach. Residents in these areas should listen to any advice given by local officials. A tropical storm warning and hurricane watch are in effect for much of the Louisiana coast, and additional watches and warnings could be required later today. Residents in these areas should ensure they have their hurricane plan in place. The slow movement of this system will result in a long-duration heavy rainfall threat along the central Gulf Coast and inland through the lower Mississippi Valley through the weekend and potentially into early next week. Flash flooding and river flooding will become increasingly likely, some of which may be significant, especially along and east of the track of the system. And here is those storm surge watches and warnings that are in effect right now. As you can see, the dark pink indicates where a storm surge warning is in effect. And the lighter pink indicates where a storm surge watch is in effect. As you can see, that extends all the way on the Mississippi coast right now. A storm surge watch is in effect. And as we take a look at the storm surge inundation of the expected storm surge at this time, it indicates the potential for mostly moderate storm surge, greater than 1 feet or greater than 3 feet. But these numbers could change a little bit with track and intensity changes, so it's important to keep that in mind. But at this time, that's what is expected of the system. As we take a look at some general consensus models here, you can kind of see, as you can tell, as the NHC mentioned and as I mentioned earlier, and just so you know, it has it listed as a tropical depression on Tropical Tidbits, which is behind the NHC. They did declare it as Tropical Storm Barry. So As we take a look at these models, we can see the UCMET still being the outlier, taking it to upper Texas coast. And then we can see that other than that, the general guidance has tightened. It has zoomed in on central and southeastern Louisiana. So it appears this is going to be a Louisiana landfall. I don't really see a scenario that would not happen at this time. It would be pretty shocking if it did not make landfall in Louisiana at this time, given the current models and what they indicate and the location of the system. As we take a look at the shear is not going to be as favorable as once thought. So what we will do is we will take a look at that shear, and we can see that what Sims analysis indicates that it indicates an upper level anticyclone is developed above the system, and that's sort of creating a shear envelope of low shear for it to be in where it can develop. So that's what is allowing Barry at this time to develop and strengthen, which it's not really strengthening all that too much, and it's still very disorganized. But regardless, that's what is. And as we take a look at the satellite imagery of Barry, we can see, once it loads, we can see some convection, and as I mentioned, it is displaced to the west and the south of the center, and we can see there at the end a little bit of blow-ups near the center, associated with the center a little bit, but it's nothing too crazy. And these tops have not hit 80 degrees, so, and as a matter of fact, they haven't even really hit in the 70s, and barely in the 70s, not even 75 degrees Celsius in the tops that are near the center. But it's, with a little bit of building convection, it's a sign of a little bit of organization. But at this time, it's certainly not going crazy. And another thing that I want to touch on, because that basically concludes all I have to say about Barry, is there's another invest now that is in the Atlantic, that is in the MDR, the main development region. And as you can see right here, invest 93L, and we will pull that up on the NHC's site right here. There we go. As you can see, an area of invest, or area of interest, or same thing essentially, has been designated in the MDR. And what this means is that the system has some chance of tropical development, although the chances right now are only 10%. As you can see, that the showers associated with the tropical wave located several hundred miles southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands remain disorganized. Some slight development of this wave is possible during the next day or two while it moves westward at 15 to 20 miles an hour before environmental conditions become less favorable over the weekend. So basically, the NIC does not really have a lot of confidence in it and did not put a lot of effort into that, because it's, to be honest, I don't really see it developing, because against climatology and the MDR is kind of cold. Even though where it's at, there is some warmer waters there. The shear and the SAL and the latitude, generally the conditions are just really not favorable for this system to develop. Now, looking at a system that will develop, that potentially has a good chance, that is not in the Atlantic Ocean, is Invest 98W in the Western Pacific Ocean. This invest has been designated recently by the ATCF. It's right now, it's the Joint Typhoon Warning Center is not officially showing it on their map. However, it is highly likely that when the development window gets closer, they will begin to show it. But as of right now, they're not showing it, as you can see. But I'm going to run some models right here. This is actually, that's Invest 93L. And as you can see right here, 98W is disorganized for the most part. But it looks better than Barry, in my opinion, at least convection-wise. But it's very weak and disorganized with a a broad center, if there's even a center. And as you can see, there's some of the intensity models, speaking of 93, that I didn't touch on that show that strengthening. But anyways, here's what some of the models show for the system in the Western Pacific Ocean. They do indicate development. Starting with the GFS, which has remained fairly consistent on development of this system, has this system slowly consolidating in the Philippine Sea, organizing into a tropical storm, which would be named Dinas, and then moving in the Philippine Straits. It looks like to be brushing Taiwan there, and then moving into China, and you can see right there another system developing behind that one. And as you can see right here on the GFS, it's showing strong ridging over Japan and Korea that's going to keep, or at least the GFS is thinking at this time, that's going to keep it down and potentially push it into China. And the Philippines probably should watch this too, because the models take it pretty close to there. And the new Euro literally just started running now, which I won't have time to cover in this video, so I'll show the previous run, the OOZ, which also shows this system developing in the 981 millibar. So we have agreement, relatively fair agreement, except the GFS develops it a little sooner than the Euro does. But we have agreement between the GFS and the Euro that the Western Pacific Ocean will wake up, if you will, because it's been definitely below average for the most part of this season, and it's been painful to watch. Besides Typhoon Wu-Tip back in February, that was a Category 5, which was a very impressive typhoon. But regardless of that, the king of all oceans can only sleep for so long, and the GFS and the Euro indicate that it is going to be waking up soon. So with that being said, it's not really a surprise. What is activating towards this is that there's a convectively coupled Kelvin wave that is going to enhance velocity potential in the Western Pacific, despite the fact that it's currently in its MJO suppressive phase. So I kind of would have expected it to wake up when the MJO suppressive phase comes back around, but it appears based on the models that this could happen when the MJO suppressive phase is active and not when the favorable phase of it comes back around. So that is pretty interesting, and we'll see what happens with the model show development. As you can see, there's absolute just rocket fuel and plenty of energy in the Western Pacific for this to happen. So okay, this concludes my video of my tropical weather update, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and I hope everybody is taking the threat of Barry of the rainfall closely, and I hope everybody is certainly not taking it too lightly, and I hope everybody is also paying attention to the system in the Western Pacific that looks like that we're going to be tracking soon, potentially. Models remaining very consistent on that. So that concludes my video. Thanks for watching.